Guess what time of the week it is? Oh, it's time for This Week in Cleantech. Mike Casey and I from TigerCom already laughing about stuff we were talking about off camera. That's how every good podcast starts, with some inside joke that the listener's not privy to. This is a roundup of this week's biggest stories you need to know about in clean energy and climate. We try to do it in 15 minutes or less. Today is Friday, February 28th, last day of the month. Don't forget to pay rent tomorrow. I'm Factor This content director, Paul Gerke, as always joined by TigerCom's Mike Casey. Stick around because we have a third party coming up soon. Cleantech returning guest Kate Yoder from Grist hopping on the show. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good. You know the saying, when the angle is out, the usurpers will play. So we're always laughing and joking.
That's what they say.
You know, I want to give listener shout-out to Trey McClure from NEI Electric Power Engineering, Anthony Chavez from Weyerhaeuser, who says, Mike, your Rogaine is working. Good job. Sophia Zasova from Brooks at Ease. Thank you, folks. We love the compliments and appreciate you all listening.
Yeah, I got one more shout out too, actually. You know how we give the email address to recommend stories every week, and I've been joking lately that it probably doesn't work? Well, it doesn't work. It turns out one of our astute listeners tried it and was like, it doesn't work. Michael Perron, thanks for the tip. Don't email that address anymore. Just send the stuff to me, paul.gerke@clearingevents.com, and we'll get a new email address figured out. And we'll remember to actually put that in the episode description too. Thanks for calling us on our BS, Mike. All right, other Mike, time for your BS. What's the first story we're getting into?
I'm warning you, I am super, super salty this week. So just stand back. All right. Our first story is by Lisa Friedman from the New York Times, titled Trump Administration Moves to Fast Track Hundreds of Fossil Fuel Projects. I am shocked there's gambling in Casablanca. Paul Gerke.
Yeah, this is a bit of a salt lick for someone feeling salty. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they're fast-tracking some fossil fuel projects, calling them emergencies, and really limiting input from the public and local officials. These projects that could potentially impact those communities for decades. Now, the Corps used to issue emergency permits to urgent repairs for things like roads, shipping channels, infrastructure after a hurricane or an event like that. But now the Corps is expanding that emergency permitting to hundreds of energy projects, citing a Trump-era order declaring that energy emergency, while he's also taking a dump on wind and solar, but that's another thing. As we discussed on the show last week, this could potentially bypass NEPA, which requires federal agencies to assess the environmental effects of major projects before construction. Mike, I think this harkens back to that executive order from a couple weeks ago, where it sort of puts the Attorney General and Trump in charge of all those agencies, giving them the final say. What did you take out of this piece?
I will not lower myself to match your scatological view. However, I will point out that October's man-whining session in Mar-a-Lago was led by corporate welfare queen and fracker Harold Hamm. It now seems to be paying off. Note that Trump campaigned on inflation, immigration, and getting rid of DEI, but he and his resident baboon troop are spending lots of time using government favoritism to boost the fortunes of the highly mature, highly profitable, and highly complaining oil and gas lobby. There seems to be no stone being left unturned to pad the pockets of the fossil fuel lobby, never mind their century and a half stay at the government trough. In this case, thorough environmental reviews aren't being done for some of these projects. Increasing the potential for oil spills or explosions, especially in ecologically sensitive areas like the Great Lakes, where my wife and I are landowners. An oil pipeline below Lake Michigan. What could go wrong, Paul Gerke?
Yeah, first of all, I'm just going to ignore the fact that someone gave you a toy to play with this week. We'll get to that a little later. I just want to call attention to resident baboon troop. That's some colorful language. Really painted a visual of the Wizard of Oz in my head, just attacking, ripping the guts out of the scarecrow. Number 2 story, Jennifer Hiller, Wall Street Journal. You've heard of it. Titled, Trump Paralyzes the U.S. Wind Power Industry. We've been talking about this topic. Mike, what'd you take out of the article?
Continuing our theme of baboon troops stealing, biting, and pooping all over everything, Trump's executive orders have paused federal permits and leasing for wind projects, and the uncertainty has led to developers to delay projects and reduce the reported value of their investments, which I'm sure is an unintended consequence of this move. Much of this permitting uncertainty stems from the need for multiple federal approvals, including permits from the Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Federal Aviation Administration. Major companies like Total Energies, Shell, and Ørsted have either shelved or reduced the value of their investments. It is unclear what will happen next to the wind industry even for projects already in construction. Paul Gerke, look into your crystal ball and tell me what it says.
Yeah, forgive the pun, but as the wind blows, I mean, it's unclear what's going to happen in the industry. Hit the horn, hit the no, give me a no. No, no, bad joke. We're worried about tax credit stuff. We're worried about supply chain stuff. We're worried about all sorts of things with offshore wind, and it's always been that way. And now you have someone in the office, the highest office in the land, who's promised that there will be no windmills built on his watch. We did see 4 gigawatts of construction along the East Coast by the end of the third quarter of last year. But if you read some of the stuff people like myself have been writing about it, in addition to the author of the Wall Street Journal piece, there's a lot of stuff stalled out, probably for the next 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
We'll see what happens even to some of those projects in construction, not necessarily guaranteed. Also want to get to, let's see, story number 3, Mike, what is it?
Evan Halper from the Washington Post titled, AI Giants Learn to Share Trump's Zeal for Fossil Fuels.
Is this going to be a fossil fuel show? I feel like we're saying the F word a lot. What? You don't call it the F word? What's the Cleantech show?
Mr. Gerke, it takes some doing to make John Engel look like a calm commentator, and you are doing it, my friend. You're doing a fine job.
This is what happens when you let me work from home. I don't talk to anyone all day, and then you just open this portal into hell right into Mike Casey's ears, and this is what you get, folks. All right, back to the article. Data centers, you know about them. They eat a lot of energy. Despite our climate goals, tech companies are turning to natural gas to try to power them. Well, they're trying to anyway. There's like 5-year lead times on gas turbines, but whatever. Trump's first-term energy secretary arguing that renewables can't meet the power demands of data centers. Has he heard of batteries, Mike? They help with that intermittency thing. American Petroleum Institute President Mike Summers says the term energy transition is shifting from that to AI and data centers. We're not even worried about the energy transition. We just want to feed the machines. Maybe we can make God before China can, Mike.
Yeah. Okay, so Paul, you'll remember last weekend when we were sunning ourselves on the deck of Jeff Bezos' mega yacht, we heard how the push to win the AI arms race is driving tech companies to rely more on fossil fuels instead of clean energy. The tech companies talk as if powering their operations with gas is temporary until more clean energy is available. But these gas plants will stick around for 30 to 50 years. Some companies have also made promises for carbon capture, but the future of that technology is far from certain. It would make more sense to supply data centers with solar power because it's far less expensive and much faster to deploy. But why go with the lowest cost when you can use propaganda and bureaucratic vandalism to buy higher cost power? Paul, what is our fourth story? I told
so
you
much,
salty. I am
There's
salty.
so much I want to say, but it's a short show, Mike. We can't do it. Fourth story. We have 2 more to get to and a guest waiting for us to shut up. This story called from Jinju Lee, from the Wall Street Journal, entitled How Tariffs Could Shock America's Power System. If the F word doesn't scare you, the T word should.
Tariffs can drive up the cost of America's much-needed grid investments with transformers, those critical equipment for integrating renewables, especially vulnerable to shortages. The power industry already faces a transformer shortage with demand set to rise. Our friends at NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, estimate that 55% of in-service transformers are over 33 years old and might need a 160 to 260 capacity increase by 2050 to meet the demand. But suppliers hesitate to invest in expanding production capacity due to long break-even timelines. Our friends at WoodMac say that only 20% of transformer demand can be met domestically, with prices already rising 70 to 100% since 2020 due to inflation of raw materials like electrical steel and copper. Steel is an essential component of transformers, and Cleveland Cliffs is the only domestic producer of grain-oriented electric steel for them. If Trump imposes 25% tariffs on products from our enemies in Canada and Mexico, as well as on copper imports, transformer prices could rise another 8 to 9%. Paul.
Cost of business just keeps doing up. I got the worst kind of story pitch the other day, Mike, and in that it wasn't a story pitch. It was an email from my utility telling me my bill was going up. New Jersey Board of Public Utilities just last week, they approved this residential hike. It's 17 to 20% depending on where you live. We've been following this for a long time, though. You remember that crappy PJM auction from last July where all the prices were like 10 times out of whack? Well, that chicken finally came home to roost, and so now all of us in this area, including the zone that I'm in, are paying crazy more for electricity while we can't get the parts that are going to cost twice as much as they used to. And we're going to put some new tariffs on top of it. Mike, do you want me to just give you my credit card number? You can go ahead and max the thing out now.
Yeah, I want to get that free trip to Tahiti
Yeah,
you guys
I
have been
bet.
promising me. I'll take it.
How about instead of a trip to Tahiti, we bring in Kate Yoder? How does that
Yes.
sound?
Our last story is written by returning This Week in Cleantech guest Kate Yoder from Grist. It's called Can Solar Power Avoid Trump's Culture Wars? Kate Yoder, welcome back to This Week in Cleantech. If people have not read your story, which we want them to do, what is the big takeaway?
I think the big takeaway is just that the solar industry is sounding really patriotic right now and echoing the way that Trump is talking about energy. So if you go to the site of SEIA, which is the industry's biggest lobbying group, you'll see like an American flag and the phrase American energy dominance, which Trump uses like right front and center. And one interesting thing I found in my reporting is that it's not just the solar industry like lobbying that's doing this, it's also people on the ground. So I talked to a real estate developer at a solar developer who was just going around talking to farmers, hoping to get them to lease their land for solar. And the way that he talked about it, a lot of times, in addition to, saying this is economical, like you can make more money off leasing your land for solar than crops for the most part. He would say like this technology was invented in America and like we can harvest the energy of the sun here, like on American soil. So talking about it in sort of that patriotic frame.
Kate, I found that too. I did an interview with Michael Perkins from Radiant Solar last year where he spoke about selling solar to the South specifically as energy freedom. As just throw that another F word, freedom in there. Did you find something similar in writing this story, that there's this, whether it's a perceived narrative shift or a real actualized one, that we're kind of turning this corner to at least try to make the other side of the fence appreciate the value of renewables?
Yeah, I think there's an increasing recognition that you don't have to talk about climate change in order to advocate for clean energy. There are groups, conservative groups, that are advocating for clean energy. And, I study polling and, what people think about climate change. Solar is really popular with Americans. Like, even though it has become a little more polarized in recent years, still 2/3 of Republicans like solar power and want more solar farms. So I think that's a really good point to note.
Kit, I would add that we've seen polling recently from conservative rural Americans where those numbers really hold up. I mean, despite the best attempts by the fossil fuel lobby back in the cylinder days to pull renewables into the culture wars, the fact is that it is cheaper, it makes us more energy secure, and it is easier to deploy, and nobody hates U.S. solar more than Z and Putin. So, Kate, we thank you for this great story. Really appreciate it. Paul, we're just about out of time. We need to go to our Cleantecher of the Week.
Let's do it. Cleantech of the Week. Drum roll, please. Do you have a drum roll sound effect on that thing, or is it just say no?
It's a no pen.
Cleantech of the Week, yes. Cleantech of the Week,
Yeah, Cleantech
no.
of the
You're
Week.
supposed to hit no. Daniela V. Fernandez, founder and CEO of Sustainable Ocean Alliance. She would have hit the no button. Daniela shared a Consumer Report study on LinkedIn. It was about the chemicals and microplastics found in our food, and how it's impacting our health. She shares a petition for a strong global plastics treaty. We're going to have a link to her post in this week's Factor This Recap. Congratulations, Daniela, our Cleantecher of the Week.
We want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, and Claire Queren and Alex Peterson for gathering these stories.
And a special thanks to Kate Yoder for her patience in putting up with us on this week's episode. This Week in Clean Tech. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, leave some feedback, share some story suggestions. paul.gerke@clearingevents.com. Don't email that old address. We've established that it's dead.
And I promise we will both take our Ritalin next week before we tape. Kate, I'm so sorry we forgot.
I'll take a double dose.
We forgot our pills this morning. So, okay. Thank you. And we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, guys. Be safe.